Alright, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. So the prejudging for the men's open portion of the 2023 Mr. Olympia just wrapped up. So we'll talk about three different call-outs here because I think there were three significant ones that we need to talk about. The first, and arguably the most important, being the first call-out. So in the first call-out, you had six guys. Brandon Curry, Derek Lunsford, Samson Dowda, Hadi Chupin, Andrew Jacked, and Hunter Labrada. So the three guys that we expected to be in there for sure were Samson, Derek, and Hadi. That's kind of what we thought. That looks like it's also going to be your top three, and we'll talk about that in a second because they had to call out just the three of those guys. Brandon, I think, looked good, all things considering the medical issues. He looked to me pretty comparable, pretty close to how he looked last year, maybe a little bit leaner this year than last. But Brandon did place fourth last year, and it looked to me, especially based on the second call-out, well, the second call-out for this grouping, it looked like that's the spot that Brandon is fighting for. So the call-out that I'm talking about, before they did the final three call-out, they did another call-out with some of these guys from the first call-out, and they added Michael Krizo to it. So they had Hunter Labrada, Andrew Jack, Brandon Curry, and Michael Krizo in this second grouping call-out. And these are for placings 4, 5, 6, and 7. So even though Michael Krizo wasn't in that first call-out, which meant he wasn't in the initial conversation for top 6, I feel like he might have moved up a little here. Because honestly, I thought in this call-out he really stood out. He really looked good. And he's probably fighting for 6th as a best-case scenario and might likely end up in 7th. But it certainly seemed like in this call-out they were very heavily comparing Andrew Jacked and Brandon Curry in the center. And it seemed like they were pretty close. And it kind of got to a point where I felt Andrew Jacked might have took the lead over Brandon. So based on that call-out, it looked like Brandon and Andrew are 4 and 5. Not necessarily in that order, and then Hunter and Krizo would be 6 and 7. Not necessarily in that order. But let's get to the main thing here. The first call-out, the top 3. Samson Dowda, Hadi Chupin, and Derek Lunsford. So we got a top 3 call-out instead of a top 2, which means it's close between all 3 of these guys, and there's not a clear defined top 2 yet. And of course, during the course of this prejudging, they moved all of these guys around and had each one of them in the center at some point or another. So there was no clear, constant center guy. So my initial impression was I really liked how Derek looked here. Derek, to me, stood out really well. I think he looked better than last year. He looked bigger than last year. I thought his color was really good, too. He had a really good tan. I feel like he really popped. Definitely, as expected, dominated the back shots. I mean, just dominated. He had, even next to Hadi, this is a difficult thing to do, but his glutes were the most striated glutes in this top 3. Even compared to Hadi's, it was like a significant level of difference. But we already knew that Derek was going to take those back poses, but the back double bicep, the back lat spread, just as this call-out went on, I feel like Derek got harder and harder from the back. His lower body looked incredible in these shots. And really stood out. Side shots too, you could see it in his lower body. Derek was in really good shape, and he really looked good. He really popped to me in these callouts. The second thing I noticed was that this is a really good callout for Samson because he looked massive in this callout next to 2 of the shortest guys in this lineup. Samson, probably the biggest, heaviest guy in this lineup. Not necessarily the tallest, but the heaviest guy in this lineup next to 2 of the shortest guys. It made him look that much bigger. Now, Hadi, of course, brought the conditioning, but what I don't know is if this was the best version of Hadi we've ever seen. I feel like it was kind of comparable to last year, and some people felt like last year's version of Hadi wasn't necessarily the best version, but Derek did look better, and to me, Hadi looked about the same. Again, really conditioned, especially in some of those front shots. Where Hadi really shines, especially next to Derek, is those deep, fibrous striations in his chest, in his shoulders, that Derek doesn't really, still, even now, doesn't really have. And I think that's still the one thing that Derek struggles with is conditioning from the front versus Hadi. But from the front, I think Derek has a much more pleasing aesthetic. He's got these big, wide, flaring lats. So we talk about how good his back is, but you can see that even from the front. Crazy small waist. His legs looked improved. His quads specifically. Derek's quads looked bigger here. Overall, Derek is the guy that's standing out the most to me. Again, it looks very close, but my eyes are drawn to Derek. And even now, looking at all these different pictures from different photographers, the lighting's a little bit different, so you can kind of get different ideas of how these guys were looking. under different lighting settings, I'm still kind of drawn to look at Derek. And if you think about the fact that last year there were some judges that voted for Derek in first, so it was close last year, the question really is this year, did Derek do enough to fill in that gap and get more votes for first place? Because he did improve. So I think he did fill that gap to some extent. The question is to what extent? And I was tempted to say, well, if Hadi is a little bit sharper from the front and maybe some of the side shots, maybe we would lean towards Hadi. But then we just saw in 212 the upset. One of the biggest surprises of the night, I think, was Keon Pearson winning the 212 Olympia against Sean Clarita, who I think was slightly more conditioned than Keon. But Keon was bigger, and he had a better shape and flow to his physique, which is kind of what Derek's strong point is too. But Keon didn't necessarily have like these slam dunk poses like Derek does. Derek's back poses are a slam dunk shots for him next to Samson and next to Hadi. And Derek has, I think, the most aesthetically pleasing physique of the three guys. So when you have a result like that 212 result, this feels like an Olympia where there's going to be a different champion. There's going to be a new guy crowned. And it feels like an Olympia where they would lean towards a guy like Derek based on that decision with Keon. So honestly, looking at this, I'm leaning towards Derek winning. I think Derek in first. I would say Hadi in second and Samson in third. Don't get me wrong, Samson looked really great here. Just out of these three, I feel like they kind of exposed his conditioning a little bit. I think they were both more conditioned than him, even though he was by far bigger. I think there was a pretty significant margin between Hadi and Samson when it comes to conditioning, and Derek too, especially from the back next to Samson. I think his conditioning just needs to come up a little bit more to be competitive, more competitive against these guys. He was competitive here, and I think it's going to be a close decision. But still, this is still massive for Samson. I mean, this is a 3-place move up from last year. I mean, remember, he was 6th place last year. So even if he is third, this is a major W for Samson. And then again, if you're talking about that 4 and 5 place spot, I think those are between Andrew Jacked and Brandon Curry. It looked to me like Andrew Jacked might end up in 4th, and I feel like Brandon might slip into 5th, even though in the beginning it kind of looked like they had Brandon in 4th, but Andrew Jacked, I think, might have looked a little bit better. And I do want to get your thoughts about the lighting, too. They did not do the plain black backdrop with no crazy lights and no crazy LEDs. Those lights were going crazy. The backdrop was super bright, super busy. There were like lasers going in front of the live stream camera, in front of the photographer's camera, especially during the individual routines. It looked like they fixed it during the call-out round, the comparison round, but during the individual routines, I'm curious to hear what you guys think if you were watching the stream. I thought they were going way overboard with those lights. The strobing, the lasers, and like the beams that were moving across, like in front of the bodybuilder. I thought it was really distracting and kind of disappointing that it looked like they were going to listen to the fans and keep like a very toned down, mild background, and that really wasn't what they did here. But of course, in addition to that, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What are your top 3 predictions? What are your top 6? And what do you think of the rest of the top 10? Comment down below. Who do you think is winning the 2023 Olympia? Is it Derek? Is it Hadi? Is it Samson? Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon, all that good stuff. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.